Cinder versus Glynda Goodwitch, the first fight between two heavy hitters that we got to see in the RWBY series. And although their clash was brief, it certainly set the bar for what was to come later on in RWBY. Now, we never got to see the conclusion of this fight. Who would end up winning between Cinder or Glynda? So let's see if we can answer that question today in the next exhibition match of the Phoenix Festival Tournament. These two will be facing off 1v1 using Amity Coliseum as the stage with no possibilities of a ring out. They'll be fighting to a full or a break, and I'll do my best to analyze their weapons, their semblances, and their fighting styles to determine who would end up being the winner, in my opinion. But ultimately, it will be decided by all of you in the comments below who would end up winning. Majority rules in this tournament. Now, one thing I will say, both of these characters have abilities that could be considered magic, so magic being forbidden in the Phoenix Festival Tournament, we're going to assume that neither of them are going to use these abilities. So no storm creation for Glynda, and no maiden magic for Cinder. Both of these characters are honestly very tricky to analyze their abilities because it's difficult to determine what exactly each are capable of. I did a full breakdown of Cinder's abilities and every instance she used them earlier this week in a separate video. I will go over it briefly in this one, but still, if you want a deeper analysis, the video will be linked up in the corner. Before we get into analyzing these two characters, though, we need to discuss last week's match between Roman Torchwick and Mercury Black. In that video, I said that Mercury would come out the winner over Roman more often than not, but the matches would be very, very close. Because a lot of people seem to underestimate Roman. Especially in close quarters, Roman is a very difficult opponent to go up against. His ability to parry and block and counterattack opponents' moves is quite astounding. Look at Volume 1 when he fought against Sun and Blake at the docks. He was barely hit during that entire fight and was able to strike back against Blake and Sun, etc. He is a very highly skilled combatant. Even at long range, his attacks are very strong. He's pretty tricky when it comes to using the hook of his cane, but Mercury, just being faster and having more experience, being raised in as assassin, etc., would give him the edge in that fight, just slightly over Roman, because Roman does have more experience being an underground of Vale, etc. And in the comments below that video, it was honestly very close as well. A lot of people were vying for Roman, thinking that with his defensive capabilities, he would eventually get the one-up on Mercury, be able to antagonize him enough to piss him off, Mercury would get sloppy, etc. And it seems my analysis of Roman also changed some people's opinions of him, which I was very happy to see. But overall, a majority did agree that Mercury would end up being the winner, though it would be very close. Glad to see people agreed with my analysis, and that was honestly a really fun video to do, which we may have to return to at some point because I think we're going to be seeing more of both of these characters as the series continues. Especially Mercury, because we haven't seen his full capabilities yet. He's not fought like real seriously in the RWBY series, I don't think, up until now, and also his semblance being stolen, I think he's going to get it back at some point or realize that he never lost it or something along those lines. I have hope that we're going to see more from Mercury. Maybe not in Volume 8, but soon enough in the RWBY series. But let's get into analyzing today's combatants, Cinder and Glynda. We'll start off with Cinder, as she's the clearest in my mind after doing the in-depth breakdown, but Cinder's abilities, at least the way she likes to use them, all revolve around fire. Her maiden abilities give her access to all the different elements, but she's more accustomed to fire, and that's what she uses, which makes it difficult to distinguish from her maiden abilities and her semblance sometimes, because her semblance revolves around heat as well. Her semblance is called Scorching Caress. She has the ability to superheat objects, and by doing so, change their shape. She most commonly does this with dust. Literal dust off the street, or dust as in the elemental substances found throughout Remnant. And she can do this manipulating them, superheating them, and changing them to glass, and even using it in combination with the fire dust within her clothes to create glass weapons. And very detailed ones at that. Even in Volume 2, creating clones of her weapons Midnight, which are dual blades that can combine into a bow. We're going to assume that Cinder is bringing her weapon of Midnight and a few arrows with her in battle, but she can always forge more out of the fire dust woven within her clothes, or if there's any dust on the battlefields. Biomes are definitely going to play a factor in this one, because if she gets a desert biome, she pretty much has unlimited ammo as long as her aura stays intact. Cinder has also been shown to be very good at close quarters combat. More so in the first few volumes, because in the later volumes, after she got the full maiden powers, she's relied a lot on those abilities, so most of the analysis for the fight is going to come from the first few volumes, because That's where she's fought, where it's more clear that she's using her semblance and the fire dust rather than, you know, maiden magic, which isn't allowed. So Cinder is very skilled, close quarters combat, and with her semblance, she can change the dust in her clothes as well as dust that she would be kicked up in the battlefield into glass shards and rain them down on opponents. Also, if she has her bow and the arrows out with it, she can superheat the tips of the arrows, fire them at opponents, and when they land into the ground, they superheat the ground, causing explosions, which are very powerful. Able to break Amber's aura, the maiden that she went up against and stole the maiden powers from after that, and she also used this in Volume 1 when she fought against Glynda the first time. Although, in that instance, she used the fire dust in her clothes, launched a fire dust attack outwards, and when Glynda blocked it, the residue from that hit the ground. Cinder had superheated it with her semblance, and it created the same explosions on the ground. So Cinder has a lot of capabilities, both long range and close range. Like, she's a very formidable opponent, but Glynda is just as much, if not more so, with her semblance of telekinesis. This is just essentially the ability to move things with her mind, and the feats that Glynda has been able to achieve are pretty astounding when you think of it. Especially in Volume 2, when she closed up the entire hole that was pretty much an entire city block almost, gotten destroyed by a train crash, she was able to, with one flick of her weapon, the Disciplinarian, just fix it all. And it seems like... I'm hesitant to analyze her abilities in this way, but it seems like there is some molecular manipulation with Glynda's semblance. The fact that she can actually rebuild objects that have been destroyed is pretty significant. And now you could say that she's just putting all of these stones back in place at the end of Volume 2 when Breach happened and there was that giant hole in the pavement. Similarly, when Crow broke the ground when he fought against Winter, that all Glynda is doing is just moving the rocks back in place. But at the end of Volume 3, when Glynda was exhausted and she was trying to rebuild Beacon, she was trying to rebuild an archway to a building. Now, if she was just putting the objects back in place, they would have fallen apart just like they did in the episode, but she was just too exhausted to actually form them together. But the fact that she thought she could form them together means that she would actually have molecular manipulation to mold them together and reform them how they were, which could also explain how she made the storm to rain down the icicles on Cinder, or at least Cinder and Roman's ship back in Episode 1, if she could manipulate the molecules in the air. Like, if she can do that extent, that is so broken, and it's a wonder how anyone could ever beat Glynda in that fact. I also think that she has magic capabilities. She might be magic herself. She might even be the relic. There's a lot of things about Glynda that we don't know, and hopefully we will find out at some point. Probably once we get to Vacuo or return to Beacon in the RWBY series, but I'm getting off on a bit of a tangent here. Regardless, Glynda has the capacity with her telekinesis to manipulate a vast amount of objects, or at least a vast mass of objects. She can lift a lot with her semblance. Breach as the prime example, the amount of concrete and stuff that she lifted up, I haven't done the exact math, but it is a lot. Not to mention, it's also questionable as to whether Glynda can use her semblance of telekinesis on another person that has aura. Because in Episode 1, when she fought against Cinder, she could have just used her semblance and threw Cinder out of the plane if she could use her semblance. We know that the range of her semblance could reach the ship. She was able to manipulate the debris and everything, having it slam into the ship, float around the ship, etc. So her semblance could reach Cinder, but I guess she just couldn't pull her out of it. But then, later in that exact same scene, when Cinder exploded the rooftop, Glynda was able to move RWBY backwards with her semblance. So it's a bit unclear whether Glynda could manipulate a person who has aura or couldn't. Because if she could, it'd be pretty much game, set, and match. She could just ragdoll Cinder and just slam her around until her aura broke, but I'm going to assume that she's not going to be able to do that. As I said, these are tricky characters to analyze, so by all means, let me know your thoughts in the comments below if I miss anything or anything like that, because there's a lot going on here and some assumptions are definitely being made. Now, when it comes to close quarters combat, hand-to-hand, etc., we don't actually know Glynda's capabilities, as we haven't seen her do anything of the sort in the show. She's always used her weapon as a conduit for her aura, directing her telekinesis where she wants objects to go, etc. And in particular, where she wants blows to go against the enemy. In the same episode of Breach where she fixed that giant hole, we also see her fight against a couple of Grimm, and when she flicks her weapon, it seems like there is a shockwave of air next to the head of the Grimm, and they end up dying from that. So she has definitely some molecular manipulation. It's difficult to say what degree it would have, because if she could start splitting molecules and splitting atoms, that gets into nuclear physics and nuclear fission, which could be a lot more. Don't think that's going to be the case in RWBY, but still, Glynda could be broken as hell, whether she's magic or not. But again, I'll leave that up to you guys to discuss in the comments below, and I'm really curious what your analysis of Glynda's abilities are going to be. But now getting into how I think this fight would actually go. With no biomes in play in Amity Coliseum, this is a difficult one to call in some cases. Because Glynda, of course, would probably, to use her telekinesis, she needs objects to move around. She could cause shockwaves around Cinder, but Cinder, also long range, would probably start off by firing her arrows, creating the explosions around Glynda, but that also giving Glynda ammo to use. She could use the debris and create that spear that she created at the beginning of Volume 1, send it flying at Cinder, but Cinder, with her semblance of the fire dust, could also create an AoE attack, melting any of the debris in the area and nullifying that. So it would be quite the stalemate between the two. Now, even if Cinder was able to rush in and get close to Glynda, because Cinder is quite fast, as was shown in the fight against Amber, I think Glynda could use her telekinesis on herself. There's no reason why she couldn't, as it's her own ability and her own aura, etc., and just launch herself away so Cinder could never get close. This fight would be a pretty large stalemate. I think these two are quite even, and in an open Coliseum, honestly, it's difficult to call who would end up winning, simply because whatever one would throw at the other, they would be able to block. Cinder could use the fire dust and melt anything that Glynda throws, and Glynda could just launch herself away and avoid any attacks that Cinder comes close range, not to mention blocking anything that Cinder is able to fire at her. So, no biomes in play. I think it would probably come down to Glynda's experience overall, because Glynda has been a fighter and a huntress for much longer than, well, probably even as long as Cinder's been alive. We don't actually know their ages, but I think Glynda's like late 30s, early 40s. I know it's not really great to guess a woman's age, but Cinder's younger than Glynda and has less experience, so I think that would end up giving Glynda the win. But, as I said a bit earlier, with biomes in play, this gives both of these characters a lot more to play with, especially if a desert biome in play. Cinder is going to have much more ammunition, able to forge whatever the hell she wants out of glass and just barrage or berate Glynda with everything. Eventually, this is going to come down to a battle of whose aura gets drained quicker by using their semblances. And it seems that Cinder's semblance of superheating things doesn't really take that much aura, whereas Glynda's, it does seem to. Simply by the scene at the end of Volume 3 where she does become exhausted rebuilding things, and there would have to be a limit to the amount of mass that she can manipulate and how often she can do that. She was able to fix everything in the cafeteria after the great food fight very easily without breaking a sweat, similarly in Breach. But then at the end of Volume 3 she was exhausted, so there's still a lot of assumptions being made here. But again, with biomes in play, and with if it's a desert biome, for example, Cinder has unlimited ammunition, but so does Glynda. She could create a dust tornado, similar to how Carmen Exclados did in After the Fall, and that could throw Cinder off. And I think if biomes are in play, I would give Glynda the win, because she would have much more ammunition able to throw at Cinder, and Cinder only has so much fire dust. But in regular biomes, or with no biomes in play, I think it's more of a draw. But overall, given Glynda's experience and the biomes in play, that Glynda would be able to use that more to advantage, I would give Glynda the win overall, but it wouldn't be an easy fight even though she's more experienced. Overall, that's my analysis. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. It was a bit wordy and a bit long, and a lot of assumptions were made, so I'm really curious on your thoughts on this one as well as previous matches. But for the next exhibition match of the Phoenix Festival Tournament, I've been debating about who to pair up against Ironwood for a while, but I think a good fight to see is one that we maybe might see in Volume 8, but James Ironwood versus Penny Polendina. Someone that Ironwood boldly claimed is completely under his control in Volume 7, but now has the maiden powers and is fighting against him, or is at least joining a faction that is opposed to Ironwood currently. Now, of course, Penny's not going to be using the maiden powers in this fight. It'll still be an interesting one to see. Any flight that Penny has, Ironwood could counter with his gravity gun, being able to shoot himself up in the air. This is going to be another fun fight. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more RWBY content, more theories, etc. Also, make sure that you guys go and vote in the best emblems poll that is currently going on. There are over 50 emblems, I think it's over 50 emblems in the RWBY series that have been shown so far. All of them are included in this poll. Link in the description below. Go and vote for your top 4 emblems in the RWBY series, and the results will be tallied over the weekend, and we'll see which ones come out on top. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, join our Discord server, and I will see you guys in the next one.